a lot of questions about the quarterback position and what the timeline is going to be for the Browns quarterback position. Right now, the Browns are through 7 weeks of football. They play 17 games, which means it's about 10 games left in the season. And the Browns are probably going to play maybe 2 more quarterbacks here, right? So people are wondering, when is Shador going to play? What is it going to take for Shador to play? What is it going to take for Dylan to continue to see the field? Is there a scenario where Dylan plays and you never see Shador? Is that possible? Is it possible that we could see Shador sooner than later? What needs to happen for that? Also, how does Deshaun Watson factor in to that conversation as well is another question. We'll answer the Deshaun Watson part first. So as far as Deshaun Watson goes, here's what we know. October 13th, they asked about Deshaun Watson, the media, and Kevin said he's a good month away from any football activity. So a good month. I don't know what your interpretation of that is at home. For me, I interpret a good month to be possibly more than a month away from any football activity, which is very strict wording on this. That tells me he's at least, a generous estimate, at least a month away from being cleared for football activity. Now, that's a problem for Deshaun Watson because he's on PUP right now. Now, the rules with PUP are likewise that you get 4 weeks to be on PUP, and then they have to decide whether they're going to be on IR or whether you're going to get another 5 weeks to kind of see what your situation is. And then after that 4 weeks, you get 5 weeks, so week 9. After week 9, you got to decide whether you're going to keep Deshaun Watson on PUP for the rest of the year and not count him towards an active roster spot, or if you're going to activate his 21-day window, which after the 21-day window, Deshaun Watson would count for a roster spot. So if Deshaun is a good month away, right, and we're being generous here and saying a month and a little bit of change, that's talking about him being until after November 16th game versus the Baltimore Ravens before he can play. If from October 13th, he's a good month away, as Kevin Stefanski has said. So if that's the case, that means week 11 is when he can be cleared for some football activity. Now, he has to open his 21-day window by week 9, which means that he will pretty much be inactive, unable to practice for his entire 21-day window, which means his ramp-up period is going to have to happen while he's on the active roster if the Browns want him to play this season. That is why I don't think he's going to be activated off PUP. Maybe he has a break here or there and he gets back a little bit faster or faster than people are anticipating, and that gets him back here. Or maybe he can get cleared to practice for football activities and maybe start his ramp-up period during his 21-day window. Either way, a generous estimate for Deshaun Watson would be he wouldn't be cleared to play until, what do I have written down here? He wouldn't be cleared to play until like week 15 or 16. Yeah, week 15 or 14 is what I have written out. So right before Christmas is when he would be cleared to play, which would leave him with 5 or 6 games left in the season. And let's say everything does go right for Deshaun and he's able to get back by week 15. I also just struggle to see the benefit for the Cleveland Browns to play Deshaun Watson again. I would think at that point of the year, if they're in a position to make the playoffs, they're probably okay with their quarterback situation, because I would assume that they're getting good enough quarterback play to be in a position to make the playoffs, so they wouldn't be really craving for Deshaun Watson to come back. If their record is terrible, then I see absolutely no reason for them to insert Deshaun Watson, because at that point, then they're going to probably lean towards focusing on the draft and doing a strategic pivot to get a quarterback that way. And And if they kind of falls in the middle where the Browns, they're not a terrible team, but they don't have real playoff hopes, I also don't see the reason to play Deshaun, because at that point it would be more valuable to play Dylan and Shador and just learn information. You've already made your mind up, whether people accept it or not. The Browns have already made their mind up about Deshaun Watson a long time ago, right? At the end of last year, they made their mind up, right? When Jimmy Haslam's on camera talking about that was a swing and a miss, and they're organizationally talking about moving on from the quarterback position and starting a new era, that tells you everything about where they're at with him, right? So they have nothing to figure out with Deshaun Watson at this point, or a desire to figure out anything with Deshaun Watson. At this point, he's just a contract inconvenience, right? That you're trying to figure out what's the best way to get him off the salary cap without really strangling yourself in the cap long term. So I just don't see where the benefit would be for them to throw him out there at the end of the season, when it would make more sense to play Shador. I mean, unless one of these rookies or both of these rookies get to the point where they're completely unplayable, then maybe that's the case. But I don't really anticipate that both the rookies are going to be completely unplayable by the end of the season. But it would take the quarterback room basically being on fire for it to make sense for Deshaun Watson to be there. And even if the quarterback room was on fire, I don't know if that's a good enough motivation, because you get to a certain point at the end of the season and your draft position is whatever your draft position is. If there's a fire going on in that quarterback room, you're not really going to be inclined to extinguish it as much as you're going to be inclined to just let it burn, because at that point you're clearing space to bring in another quarterback. So I just don't see a lot of scenarios where it makes sense for Deshaun Watson to play. So I don't think he's coming back this year. I think for the Browns side of it, they benefit from not having him play this year way more than they would with him having him play. Even if we aren't factoring in things like the insurance that they have on the cap if Deshaun doesn't play this year. So they get a little bit of reimbursement money from his contract if he doesn't play this year because of the insurance they have on the contract. So they benefit that way financially. They would also benefit because they get to get more information on these rookie quarterbacks before they draft a quarterback in the first round, more than likely. I don't see any way this benefits the Browns, and ultimately it's the Browns' decision to make whether Deshaun is activated or pup. Now, for Deshaun Watson, obviously he's going to want to come back and play because he wants to make his money and he wants a chance to prove that he's not washed anymore. But that's not something that the Browns are really going to be factoring into their decision making as much, because again, they got to think about themselves at this moment. So now I don't think Deshaun's going to play for those reasons. I talked to Jack Duffin, well, not talked to, but I've saw what Jack Duffin has posted out there. And I would generally agree with it when it comes to the whole Deshaun Watson thing. But that's the Watson part of it. Let's kind of focus in on the Shador and Dylan part of this. But before I get to that, I want to thank my sponsor, Sleeper. Real quick, just want to let you guys know Sleeper has a new offer here. They're offering a free $20 entry, no deposit required. And also, if you're a first-time user, you also will receive a 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code WORSTTAKE. Again, $20 free, no deposit required. Plus, first-time users also receive 100% deposit match up to $100. Join Sleeper. All right, so the dynamic between Dylan and Shador right now, right? When are we going to get to see Shador? How much longer are we going to see Dylan? How much longer do you think the Browns are going to play Dylan Gabriel? So here's the thing, right? Dylan is the starter right now. And that means there's two things that you could do with him, right? If he gets injured, Shador will play. He's the backup. Or if Dylan plays extremely poorly to the point to where you can't justify him being out there, then you put in Shador. Neither of those two things have happened yet, right? I know a lot of people have made a big deal of, things that Dylan's not doing, but you look at the first 3 weeks that he has had as a NFL quarterback, and you look what you asked of him these 3 weeks, it's not enough to bench him what he has or has not done. Can he obviously stand to improve? Yes, he's been pretty C- out there, right? Sometimes missing opportunities, right? Sometimes being too passive. but he's done enough to keep you in 2 of the 3 games that you played in, and he's not turned the ball over. So that means that he's going to stay out there unless he starts turning the ball over, right? Me personally, I think the Browns are going to be dead set on giving him at least 6 starts before they even really consider benching him. So if we pull up the schedule right now, right, if you give Dylan 6 starts, right, so we're talking about 4th start being against New England, you get the bye week, 5th start being against the Jets, 6th start being against the Ravens. Now, if he's an absolute disaster in this 4-week stretch, with the bye week, then you could look to the Raiders game being where they could possibly turn to Shador. If he's fine in this 6-week stretch, then I think he's not going to play in this window of games, right? This window of games from like the Jets to the 49ers. Yeah, like this November stretch. I think if he gets to the Baltimore game and he hasn't played his way out the job yet, he's going to continue to play unless he gets injured. Now, the window I think that he's in most danger with of losing his job, where I could see a stretch of games that could go very strangely for him, that can end up with him benched right here, right? These 4 games, this little stretch from Thanksgiving to the week before the game before Christmas, right? And you might even want to add that Buffalo Bills game, because I don't know if it would be a good idea to just start Shador against the Buffalo Bills. I feel like if you can rock with Dylan that far, you might as well throw Dylan in that game if you're going to bench him a week after, put him in versus the Steelers or something like that. But the Bills would be kind of crazy. All right, so this stretch right here, possibly at that Bills game there, that's the danger zone for Dylan. The reason I say this is, yes, the Raiders do not look like a good team, but the Raiders game, West Coast, it's just always been a strange game for the Cleveland Browns. Remember last year's game where like Deshaun was actually decent in that game, but we just dropped and had all these penalties for every opportunity. It's always a strange game. The Duke Johnson game, always a strange game. The Nick Chubb 3 carries, 300 yards game, always a strange game versus the Raiders. And strange usually leads to a lot of turnovers, right? Then you're playing the San Francisco 49ers. The last time I remember the Browns playing the San Francisco 49ers, other than like the PJ Walker game, was the Monday Night Football Baker Mayfield game, which was really bad for Baker at that point in time. The 49ers, if they get healthy, have a attacking defense that can really do a lot of damage to the Browns, depending on where they are at this point in the season. Then you got this Titans game. This Titans game is going to be a little tricky here, right? Because the thing that gets people fired in the NFL, whether it's you lose your job as a quarterback or a head coach, is expectations. Win-loss record, sometimes it gets you fired, sometimes it doesn't. The track record on that's really dicey. But what gets you fired more than anything in the NFL is expectations, high expectations. The Browns are going to walk into that Titans game at home knowing that they should win it, right? And if Dylan has a bad 2 weeks here, right, versus the Raiders and versus the 49ers, which is very possible, a high turnover 2 weeks here, and then you don't beat the Tennessee Titans, that could be the breaking point that leads to Shador about December 14th. Now, maybe they're thinking if you can hold off and play Shador after December 21st, maybe you see that. But I would think that's the window right there, right? I think this game right here, Chicago versus at Chicago, and then until the end of the season, I think that's the realistic Shador Sanders window, that you're probably going to see him at max about 4 games, because I do think that they're going to give him at least until Baltimore. He could end up having a couple of good games between there that could buy him some more time, and then you get to December 14th, and then that stretch happens, and then you play Shador then. That's how I think this whole thing's going to play out, right? Unless Dylan plays like really well down the stretch, right? Let's say the the Browns are winning games, Dylan's playing well, then he's going to play the rest of the season, right? Or if Dylan just like doesn't turn the ball over at all for the rest of the year, then maybe he plays out the rest of the season. I also think the reason that this stretch here, December 14th to January 4th, is the biggest window here of opportunity for Shador is there's a chance that by the time you get to about week 14, how many starts would that be for Dylan? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 starts, if you're not hitting certain barriers as a passer, are going to start to stand out. So Dylan's first game, he threw for 182 yards. His second game, he threw for, oh, my bad, I'm reading the wrong thing. So Dylan's first game, 182 yards. Then against the Steelers, they passed for, the passing offense went for under 200 again, under 200. If you go this whole stretch of games right here, under 200 yards. So if you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more weeks of under 200 yard performances, or maybe like one in between all 6 of these games, then that's clearly going to lead to a benching. So, I think you're willing to live with, okay, the training wheels are on, the rookie quarterback excuses until like after the Baltimore game. If you get 3 disappointing performances after that, then you're going to probably move on here. I know that this timeline might be a little bit slower than what most people want. I think some people want to get to the bye week here and then just start Shador against the New York Jets. I don't think the Browns are going to set Shador to play 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games and only give Dylan 4 starts. That does not make a ton of sense to me unless that, and here's the other way that Dylan could get benched, right? Unless Shador is so amazing at practice every day that they're saying to themselves, Shador is just better than Dylan, then that's how that can happen. But if they're still at the same place where they've been all season, where they've been convinced that Dylan is better than Shador, at least right now, Dylan's better than Shador, which is, I know a lot of people say a lot of things about Dylan. Oh, he's a career backup quarterback and all of this stuff. But you do have to contend if you're going to say that about Dylan. What does that say about Shador? Like, if we're not going to resort to conspiracy to explain it, if Dylan is a career backup and he's not that good, then why hasn't Shador overtaken him for the quarterback job? Maybe there is an explanation for that doesn't involve Shador not being that good, or maybe there is an explanation for that, but I don't know, right? Like, that's something that you have to contend with, especially if you're not trying to deal in conspiracies, right? Where you're saying the Browns are trying to sabotage him or something like that. If you want to just look at this straight up, you got to ask yourself that question. If you think Dylan is all of this, then why can't Shador beat him out? Again, my expectation when they drafted both of them was that Shador was going to prove that he was much better than Dylan Gabriel pretty early in this process. And that just never happened, right? Like, we got to the preseason and I was surprised, because I like Shador much better in the draft than Dylan. But I was surprised that, by the time we got to the end of the preseason, I could really understand why it is that the Browns would want to go with Dylan over Shador at that point. So, that also has to be asked, right? I don't think enough people are asking that part of it, right? We're kind of just assuming Shador is better than Dylan because of where they sat on a lot of people's draft boards, months ago. But if Dylan is mid and all this stuff that people say about him, what does it say about Shador? Now, if Shador is in those meeting rooms, he's killing it, and they're saying to themselves internally, hey, we got to get the game. We got to get Shador into the game. We got to play Shador because we think we could be more explosive with them. Then, yeah, Shador's going to play sooner than that 4-week window. But if everything is going as it's going right now, I think the current trajectory is this: Dylan Gabriel, Dylan Gabriel, Dylan Gabriel, Dylan Gabriel, Dylan Gabriel, Dylan Gabriel, Shador Sanders, Shador Sanders, Shador Sanders, Shador Sanders. So that's my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts on how this is going to roll out. But y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.